Aloha my kako and welcome back to another book review. I am Mama Kitty and today we are going to be reviewing Stars and Soil by Dax Murray. This is another ARC that I got off of NetGalley. For those of you who may be new here, ARC stands for Advanced Reader Copy, where basically I get an often unedited copy of a book in exchange for an honest review. So a little bit about the author. According to the website, which I will link down in the description below for you guys, Murray is, quote, a writer of revolutionary fantasy that focuses on trauma, healing, and leftist political advancement, end quote. They have a cat that they call God, and also do a lot of bonus materials like lore drops and stuff like that on places like Campfire and Ream, which based on my very limited understanding, is kind of similar to Patreon. Okay, so normally this is where I would read out the Goodreads synopsis. However, I found that the edition on Goodreads is different than the edition I got off of NetGalley, and the description of the book is different from both of them as well. So I'm gonna go with the NetGalley slash Campfire synopsis instead of the Goodreads synopsis. It is a little long, so just bear with me. The land is dying. Commoners are protesting, and workers are revolting. The king is ailing, but the prince is not stepping in to quell the unrest. Caitlin doesn't care. She hasn't cared about anything since the day her world shattered and she lost everything. But fate intervenes to make her care, throwing first a rebellion leader and then the spoiled prince in her path, giving her the influence and power to rule the realm as queen or tear it all down from the inside. Caitlin would be more than happy to destroy the kingdom, but there's more to the story than the rebels know. Dark forces lurk behind the throne, and if Caitlin is to keep her head attached to her shoulders, she will need to learn more about court politics and ignore the fluttering of her heart whenever she sees a certain court lady. Caught in a web of deception and conspiracies, militant revolutionaries, cryptic priestesses, and a secretive lady-in-waiting with a ruthless family, Caitlin must unravel the truth of a long-hidden magical prophecy, where she will become yet another pawn of an enemy far more dangerous than a tyrannical king. An enemy that has been plotting in the shadows for centuries. To start, as we do, the pacing was very good. I felt like we were moving through the story very consistently, although it did kind of go from a nice, steady walking pace to like a full on sprint about halfway through the book. But I really enjoyed those ups and downs in the tempo of the story, especially as our leading lady, Caitlin, tried to deal with her inside and outside dilemmas. Now, even though the pacing of the first half was actually very, again, it moved nicely, it kept us going. It didn't really start to drag anywhere. It felt very intentional, but even so, it was also very chaotic. Now, I understand that there is the possibility that that chaos feeling was intentional. In fact, I kind of almost think it was. But even if the chaos is intentional, it was still a little bit too much chaos in the sense that it became hard to read. I think also there is a possibility that I just wasn't really a fan of the writing style, which I definitely understand is a me issue. And I don't, even though I say that the writing was not my style, I don't know necessarily say that the writing was bad or anything like that. It was just a little bit difficult to muddle through, and kind of I almost DNF'd it because of that. Part of the chaos, though this did end up becoming my favorite thing ever, Murray uses gender neutral pronouns. I adore that Murray did that, but I didn't know what it was at first, so I did have to go like look up what XIR was or ZIR or whatever. Um and once I like had the context, I was like, "Oh, okay, that's really really cool." But before I had the context of that, um it was very confusing because it was just I understood that they were pronouns, but I didn't understand where they came from. And so it kind of made this weird sort of feeling of confusion throughout the first several chapters before I was like, okay, wait, this is something real. I need to look this up. Which again, I understand is a little bit of a me problem, but again, I really, really adored that they used it. Some of the other confusion came from not really being up to date with the different kinds of creatures that were in this world. So the main sort of species, I guess, were definitely humans. And then there was this one species that kept being mentioned. There's several characters of this species called Kala, I think, which I believe are cat people. They didn't sound quite like tabaxi level of cat people, but they definitely had like ears and tails, and I assume they have some kind of claw situation, and they're very like dex dexterous. um and again, I think the confusion or the lack of understanding around this species, or whether there's more species than this, is a me problem, and I totally understand that. But it was just kind of like unexplained, I guess. Now, that all being said, again, I understand that that's probably a me problem. I did try to read this book very, very quickly because I was trying to get through it before it got archived on NetGalley. So there's 100% possibility that it did get like talked about, and I just kind of missed it. But yeah, I mean, even if I wasn't sure what they looked like or what they were, I still loved them. I'm a sucker for cat people. Okay, so let's talk about Caitlin. She's our leading lady, and I very much had a love-hate relationship with her. I understood and could empathize with the things that she was going through, but she was just kind of whiny. Like, I get it. People, for the first time in your life, are pushing you to choose for yourself. Um, and you're a little lost, but could we suffer in silence, please? And maybe that's a little cold and maybe a little ironic, since in reality, she did suffer in silence because she didn't have anybody that she could really talk to. Although she did, use her rebellion leader friend to talk about stuff sometimes, but it just wasn't, she didn't like trauma dump on anybody, which I think she probably really needed to do at some point. Just get that off your shoulders. I didn't mind the constant reminders of the things that she lost and the things that she was missing, because that kind of pain and that kind of loss never goes away, right? Even if you find a new partner, it's not something that just goes away, right? That partner is not a replacement for the one that you've lost. But it was everything else that she allowed to happen to her, without really taking any responsibility for that. That's really what bothered me about her. I think maybe part of this issue came from it felt like, and I believe that these are not young adults, right? I'm pretty sure these people are like in their 30s. And if they're not, I'm so sorry. That's just the vibe I got. And even if they're not in their 30s, they definitely were older than I was expecting walking into the story. And so I guess I kind of just expected her to be a grown up about it. But I know sometimes that's too much to ask. Now, I bring up young adults, right, and young adult novels, and part of me wonders if maybe this book should have been a young adult novel. I think the whole concept, which I absolutely adored, um, might have hit a little bit differently slash better, if it had been a younger cast. I think part of the reason I had a little bit of a hard time with it was just this idea that these were all adults, or at least they felt like adults, and they felt like adults making teenage choices. And so I'm not, yeah, I'm just unsure of what the age range was, and I think that there is a big difference in tone depending on what the ages were. Like I said, I very much enjoyed the overall concept. That's part of why I kept reading. Like, I really loved times a thousand this story. I adored the deceptions and the revolutions, and the relationships, and the destruction of relationships, and it was just all so good. And I think, probably ironically, the prince was actually my favorite character. I don't know how to pronounce his name. I don't even remember what I was saying in my head, but his struggle, right? The struggle that is forced upon him was really, really heartbreaking, and I think really well done. He wanted so desperately to protect Caitlin from the snakes in his court and just couldn't. And I was sad about his story in particular because I wish he had gotten a last real moment with Caitlin, which maybe is a little spoilery. I'm sorry. So anyway, let's get into the LGBTQ-ness of this. I loved it. Like, Caitlin, so gay. But I think she was supposed to be bisexual. And but she never like showed romantic interest for either of the men in her life, whereas with that particular court lady that the synopsis mentioned, right, there is a level of attraction that is discussed, in, her mind. Regardless of what her sexuality was, though, I adored it. I adored the relationships that she built, and yeah, she was kind of, I don't know, she's just kind of spicy. And then, there's this buildup, and there's intrigue, and the bad guys are thwarted, and the good guys are winning, and all of that, and then it just ends. I was genuinely so disappointed with the ending of this book. Like, Caitlin made such a big deal about, you know, getting her lover out of the court with them and having a happily ever after, and then we don't even get an allusion to whether or not they like work out. Granted, there are other books in this series. It's called Scions and Shadows. So it's possible that they're like mentioned later, and then we get to see them living happily ever after. But regardless, I was really big sad about it. Overall, it was a very fun read, and again, I greatly enjoyed the story as a whole. That being said, I'm gonna give it a 3.5 stars out of 5. I liked it, but I had a hard enough time with it for it to become frustrating. However, I would still recommend this book to people who like fantasy and political intrigue, and especially fantastical political intrigue. It definitely wasn't my favorite book or anything like that. But I definitely don't regret pushing through and getting through the whole thing. So that's it. That's the review. The next book we will be looking at is called Starlets by Lee Kelly and Jennifer Marie Thorne. This is my first NetGalley audiobook, so I'm very excited to see kind of how that works out. Make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on your notifications so that you can be alerted to when that next video comes out. And that's it. So thank you all for coming by. Thank you all for listening. Make sure that you guys go on to TikTok and follow my new BookTok account. I'll link that down below for you guys as well. We do lots of bookish and authorish content over there, and occasionally a silent review, which for this book will be going live whenever this goes live. So again, thank you very much for coming, and I will see you all on the next video.